We are here to share some knowledge and show you how to perfect your bench press.
If those start to take over, so if you're not benching correctly, those can definitely get injured. So you want to strengthen your rotator cuffs for sure. Really focus on like my eccentrics. So I'll start out, warming up, focusing on the concentrics as we're pushing through. And then towards the middle, once I'm warmed up, is when I really focus on slowing it down for eccentric control.
Welcome. This is the Performance Coaching Call. I'm Dylan and Dusty here to build an ultimately bigger chest, bigger, fuller, thicker chest. So we're going to show you the exact fundamentals of what to do so you can go at home in your own gym and maximize your bench press, build more muscle, and just ultimately grow. All right. So that's what we're going to dive in today. I want to introduce a problem that I see all over the place, really. And even in myself, I see a massive spines, our upper bodies are so rolled forward. Now, I know this personally just from working at a desk job, just sitting at a desk on the computer, eventually start to roll forward like this. And especially being in the gym constantly, day in and day out, as I usually do, I'm always noticing my chest and my upper body is more tight than anything else, really. So what we're going to talk about here is how to fix that. We're going to dive into the fundamentals behind it, and we're going to show you the mechanics and what to do stretching wise and warm up wise, and then moving through on execution to help you really build your bench and increase your strength and increase your size. So with that being said, Dusty, why don't you walk us through kind of the strengthening and what we should do before, kind of walk us through the anatomy of how everything's set up too.
Okay. So like strengthening you want to do before you start benching, probably start with like your serratus anterior. This is something that's in front of your body. So this plays a part in the upward rotation of your scap, and it plays a part in all push movements. So this is something that typically can get injured. So this is something that you want to definitely hit first. So like a serratus punch is an exercise I always start with or work into my push days. So that's a good one. And then, so like if your delts, your bicep, I always include that into shoulder days and chest days. So like just some internal, external rotation cable exercises, super important to make sure that those don't get injured. Absolutely. And then core too. You always want to have a strong core as a foundation to almost anything.
Yeah, and we talked about that a lot last week too.
Yeah,
we talked about the really focusing on building your core with planks and different variations of planks, because the core is just really designed to brace and stabilize and to transfer force. So you got to really focus on that. The core is going to really strengthen everything, all your lifts. When you can really brace and stabilize your spine, stabilize your whole body, your strength is going to go through the roof. You can honestly, not just strength, but with building muscle, it's really determined based on how much you stabilize. You can only contract so hard with as hard as you can stabilize, or as much as you can stabilize. So how well you stabilize directly affects how much muscle you can build. So that's a key thing to focus on, guys. Doing these warm-ups, like Dusty said, doing the external rotations and internal rotations with a band, that's so key. And even to throw your arm up and go this way as well. Some internal and external rotations up high as well. Just to loosen up your arm, make sure you're keeping your chest high and brace your core, keep your abs tight while you're doing the whole thing. You don't want to be rolled forward and let loose. You want to be up and strong with doing that. That's killer. So what are some good, with doing the core, we talked about for back day, you should always warm up with the core. We're doing some planks for warm up. I love giving my clients like Jason here. I always tell him to do planks before the workout as well, just for that whole warm up priming factor. What do you think some other exercises are for that could be used?
On chest day, I mean, doing like a bird dog would be good. Planks obviously are always good. I'm not huge on like sit-ups, just because I know like that can definitely injure your lower back sometimes if not done correctly. So I would stay away from that. But yeah, I would still stay with planks. It's usually a really good one.
Yeah, that's key. Yeah, dude, that's No more. I threw crunches out of my routine so long ago too.
Yeah.
For that exact reason. Yeah, you gotta focus on strengthening the spine, not bending it in certain ways. But
Right. And I
awesome.
know we talked about this last time too, but breathing is always super important. That's part of your core. So make
Yes,
sure we're always breathing throughout too.
absolutely, absolutely. Cool. So then moving into, once you do that, once you get primed, once you get ready, moving into the bench press. Now, a lot of people set up a little differently, but there are 5 points of contact that you always want to maintain. And I'm sure Dusty will say this as well. I'm sure he preaches this all the time too, but you always want to make sure your feet, your lower back, your glutes, your upper back, your hands, and your head, those points of contact should always remain. Always remain. That means you don't want to lift one leg or move your arms in that sense. You want to have all points of contact in contact with something at the whole movement throughout the whole range of motion. So that's going to be another thing for stabilizing as well.
Just kind of going off that. So typically if you want to do like more of a bodybuilding stance, like you're trying to build the chest, you want your feet flat on the floor. It's so like a little bit further out. And then if you're wanting to be more of like a power lifter, you'll bring your feet a little bit further in, and that's going to drive the force up a little bit more, but it's not going to work your chest as much. You're going to get a little bit more lat activation. So you'll get more power, but you won't activate your chest as much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's key. That's key. And then especially when you're thinking of activating your chest, especially with any variation of the bench press, any push movement, you got to really think of, fully coming in and contracting your chest fully. I was actually spotting a kid today at the gym, and he was going wide. He was getting a deep stretch. He wasn't getting a full contraction in. So it's very important, and we'll talk about this more as well here, to utilize different angles, different parts of the strength curve. But it's also very important as well to make sure you're always getting a full contraction, overloading the contraction. So that's a key to remember as well. And to get a full contraction, you got to make sure this is where your elbow crosses this midline right in your chest. That's how you know your chest is fully contracted. So when you're doing these, the best way to fully get contracted is doing flies and doing machines as well. That's where you can really focus on slow, controlled movements and really focus on holding that contraction, spending time in that end range. That's going to be key for building that mass, building that thickness.
I mean, sometimes it's hard to get into the correct position. I've noticed I've almost thrown out barbell bench completely and went to dumbbell. Yeah. Just because you want that certain degree of rotation in your elbows. You don't want your elbows to be like perpendicular to your body. You don't want them out straight like this. You want them to be at like a 30 to 60 degree angle, almost like you're trying to tuck something into your armpit. That's going to allow you to push more, because if you're here, you're going to be using more of your delts. That's where you can get injured. You're going to use your rotator cuff too much. So you want to be in like a 30 to 60 degree angle with your elbow closer to your body than completely out like this. So that's why I've used dumbbells more than barbell.
That's huge, because that's going to really activate and keep stable your lats. It's going to keep your lats engaged, because when you're up here, you're really not using your lats. And in order to really get a full push, you have to almost like you're contracting your lats when you're stretching, just to like lock and load it and then push and explode. So you have to use that agonist, antagonist muscle groups, the opposites, together simultaneously to really maximize your contraction, maximize your strength with that. So elbow position, keeping that tighter. I know a lot of people in the gym always like to go wide and go up high, especially using an incline, especially on the incline as well. Now, just to add on to what Dusty said, when you're talking about where your elbow is positioned, yes, you got to think about strength, but for bodybuilding, for specifically training a specific angle of the muscle fiber, because you got to think about where those fibers are originating on the sternum right here, and they're moving into your humerus, into right above your shoulder joint. So your chest really is controlled by where your humerus, your arm, moves. So you can train lower chest this way, the lower fibers, you can train right in the middle, and then you can train the higher fibers in the chest as well, just by moving your arm path as well. So holding that elbow position here, and then moving your arms to match the fiber path, that's really going to be how you develop a full, thick chest. A lot of times people go into the gym and they're just pushing in this angle. They're moving here and they're never really training this angle here or here, or even right in this angle as well. So making sure you're hitting all those angles, that's really going to develop the muscle fiber itself and grow that. That's for hypertrophy and to really get a full, thick chest. So key points with some different widths. What about, Dusty? What would you say is the best? Because I hear this all the time. I hear different things all the time. What would you say is the best thumb position, hand position for dumbbells, barbells, anything?
So for dumbbell, for barbell, you can use your thumbs, but it's going to put a lot of strain on your wrist. Yeah. Your wrist is a much smaller and weaker joint than your elbow and your shoulder. So what I tend to do is I have people take their thumbs out. So they'll put the bar behind the thumb. Yep. And then once you take the thumb out, it's going to move it lower on your palm. And then this is going to allow you to use your elbow and shoulder more than your wrist. Right. So you'll able to definitely contract your chest more and get more force through that drive.
Oh, that's key. And I know somebody's probably watching this out there and they're like, well, what if you drop it? What if you're holding it like that and just rolls off? Right. So how would you then hold that in there? Just make sure. So
you'll definitely feel as it sinks in. And once it sinks in, it's pretty hard to get it to go above. So that your thumb has that muscle right here. It's pretty hard for the bar to go up and over that. So unless you roll your palms forward, it's probably not going to fall. So just making sure you get it above that thumb muscle. So then it just sticks into that placement right.
Nice. And if it hurts at first, it'll stretch out. You got to get that mobility in your joints as well. That's going to help your overall strength. That's key. Good. So, all right. So let's talk about this, Dusty. Here's a good one. So when maximizing your muscle, when fully developing your muscle for chest, when I talked about a little bit of the elbow position and the different angles, but there's more to that as well. And just to elaborate on that, I want to talk about kind of the strength curve and the different overloading different angles and what is the best way to set up your workout for chest. So I feel like that would be a great thing we could do. And then we could jump into some Q&A after this as well. Jason, if you're up for that. So really, when you're talking about setting up your workout for chest, you got to think about, and this is honestly for any work, for any exercise, for any muscle group, you want to always overload the shortest end of the range where the muscle is fully contracted. You want to overload that first. You want to think about fully taxing that part of the strength curve first, and then go into the fully lengthened and the medium range. And when I say medium, if we want to think about a full 180 spectrum here, where if you're doing like a fly, this will be fully stretched when you're out to the 180 degree, and then right into 90 right here is, fully contracted, fully shortened. So think about this spectrum here. You want to make sure the muscle is really overloaded in when it's fully contracted. So that means doing things the first in the warm up, for your warm up, or in your priming sets for your exercise or your workout. You want to do things like flies that are fully overloading the contraction, right? And you want to make sure that you're fully shortening and spending some time in there. This is where tempo comes into play. Training for tempo, holding the concentric and then holding tension in the eccentric in the times in between. So using tempo, we can really manipulate how we're overloading the strength curves, overloading these different angles. Now, it's very key, like I said, to do some flies, to do some overloading, for even doing like a machine where you're pressing and then holding that contraction, not just holding it where your joints are stacked, but actually squeezing that chest, focusing your intention, focusing your mind into that chest. And then towards the end of this is where we can stack some flat press, some barbell, dumbbell press, anything like that, where that's going to really overload the middle part of the range. And you're still going to get some good stretch in there as well. So how you can set up your workout and how I always set up my workouts and how I set up my clients' workouts as well is just like that, is overloading the short ends of the range first, and then working the middle and the long, the eccentric. Really, when I say long, it's really when the muscle's fully lengthened. It's working those throughout the rest. So knowing that, and that's kind of, if you step back, that's the full kind of scale that I look for and I set up for workouts. Dusty, do you have any pointers or anything like that when you're creating your workouts?
Yeah. So like concentric, obviously you're going to build muscle, but
yeah, that's huge, man. I used to think, when you go to failure, it was all in concentric when you're shortening the muscle and holding that contraction. And I didn't even realize you can go to failure that way, but you still have some left in the tank. The eccentric end is still not overloaded. You still have some more energy left there to overload that. So this is where pause reps or assisted reps and those type of working sets with a partner really come into play. Having somebody to spot you, to give you that extra lift so you can then focus on a slow, controlled stretch. That's how you really achieve failure. That's killer. That's where the muscle growth is. And that's good, man. Well, that's good. So we talked about some good strengthening pre-warm-up exercises. We talked about the good grip position and elbow position and how to maximize and utilize different angles and why we set it up that way. Jason, my man, did you have any questions over anything we went over in that sense?
Well, if you could, I guess, just go over like the what you're talking about just now, the programming, like what comes first, because I was thinking you said the full contraction first.
Yeah, you want to overload the concentric, the fully shortened portion, the end of the range. So that's when you're doing flies and cable flies and even using machines, and you're just holding that contraction. You're not stacking your joints, but you're really holding that contraction in the chest. And this is why we use cables. Dumbbells, if you're doing a fly right here where you're holding that contraction, your joints are stacked, so gravity is at play to put that weight to create force. If your joints are stacked, then the dumbbell doesn't really put force into your chest, putting it into your joints. As soon as you break that straight line, that's when your muscles turn on to stabilize your joints. So doing cables, this is where you can manipulate that strength curve. You can be right here and still get the full force of the weight. But in order to do that, you have to make sure where your arm and the cable make a 90 degree. You want to make sure that's where you're fully shortened, because that's where the cable, the weight is going to be fully displaced, the force into your chest. When the closer that cable is to your arm, the easier it is. And the farther away it is from your arm, the easier it is as well. So when you have that 90 degree in the cables, that's where you can really overload your chest, really feel the full weight of the cables. So when you're doing flies, instead of having the bars right here and taking a step forward, you want to take a step backward. So that way you can stay right here, and this will be fully overload. The cable will make a 90 degree right there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite warm-ups for chest. It really turns on every muscle fiber and gets your neuromuscular facilitation really engaged. That's a good one.
Building on like constant. So in physical therapy, we will start with like isometrics, which is just like flexing the muscle. So that's the easiest, right? And then it goes to concentric, which is when you're in the shortened spot. So when you're benching, when you're up here and your muscle is shortened, that's your concentric. And then the hardest one is eccentric, which is the lowering phase. And that's what works the muscle the hardest. So I typically work that into like the middle of my workout. I want to hit those eccentrics pretty hard in the middle of my workout, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And is like you were saying, the eccentrics were best for building strength. Is that also hypertrophy as well? Just building muscle?
Yeah, so that's going to work your muscle the hardest is the eccentric. So like if someone's hurt, we don't want to do eccentrics because it's the hardest on their muscle. We'll focus on the isometrics and the concentrics. So eccentrics comes last because it works your muscles the hardest.
That is huge. That's a great question, Jason, because like Dusty just said, that's absolutely where you're building the most amount of muscle. And that's why a lot of people go through the motions in the gym and aren't seeing the progress they want to see. It's because they're not controlling that eccentric. Like, Jason, do you remember when I told you to really start slowing your movements down and controlling those, holding those 2 second eccentric and 2 second concentrics? Yeah, man. And you know how that felt. That the reason is you're really engaging the muscle on a whole new level when you slow it down and when you cause and utilize space and time in that way. So a lot of people just don't do that. They neglect it. They don't focus on that eccentric. They don't focus on controlling. They'll just let the weight fall and then explode up and then just let it fall again. Yeah.
That's what I've heard some recently, people talking about like doing cheat reps and stuff. And it's like, well, when are you doing it? Are you doing it on the first rep, or are you doing it to get 2 more at the end? You know, that could be more beneficial.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Going back to the flies, what I always see is, you know, I've always been trying to keep my arms as straight as I can, whereas I see a lot of people doing like the push on the cables. And I've come to realize, like, you know, that could be useful, but that's going to give you more of just what a bench press would.
Exactly.
Not a fly, really.
Yeah, exactly. There's a time and a place where you can utilize anything and everything and make it beneficial. So it's just about where that is in your workout and what else you've done, right? You can definitely do like an end of your workout and turn the cables into like a chest press, and you'll really get it'll be an easier contraction. So you'll be able to really squeeze hard. And then it'll be more focused on really where you're fully lengthened, the full eccentric. That's where the full load's going to be, because that's where your arms are right here. Remember what we talked about, where your arm and the cable make a 90-degree?
Yeah.
That's where it's going to be. It's going to be harder at this point compared to this point, because the cable's so close to your arm and it's right in there. But here, there's a little bit of distance, and you're pulling your chest in that sense. So it's pulling it back. But still, with that being said, definitely making sure you're working the lengthen, you're spending time in that fully lengthened portion, and that middle portion as well is definitely going to help you, and just not only just build strength in the gym, but also help you with your recovery as well, and your mobility, and just how you're able to move on a daily basis. Good question, man. You got any other ones for us?
Well, I mean, could you talk about dips for chest a little bit, and just like what your setup is for that?
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Dusty, what do you think on that?
Yeah, so that's going to be dependent upon your angle there. So like if you're going straight up and down, that's going to work more of, you know, like your shoulders and triceps. But if you go at more of an angle with your body, then you're going to be able to hit your chest.
Bend more down this way.
Yep. So like that, then you'll be working your chest a little bit more. I typically don't use those too often. It can strain your elbow kind of bad. And some people have like some nerve issues. So it can be, but like if it feels fine for you, you can definitely hit chest pretty hard on that. And once it becomes easy, you know, you can start adding weight to yourself too, and that type of stuff. But yeah, it's all going to be dependent on your angles. So like if you're here, more triceps, here is going to be more chest.
Yeah. And the key to remember with that, with every exercise as well, setting your body up and how you set your body up before each rep, before each set. So when you're doing this, you want to have a tight core, you want to have a neutral spine, and you want to raise your thoracic spine. So you want to have a chest, you want your chest to be up. You don't want to be leaned over like this and rolled forward like this. You want to be up with your chest up, and you want to be moving in this angle where you can really hit your lower chest fibers. You can move in this angle right here. right? So you need to match your body to get yourself into that angle. That's where, especially Arnold, he always used to do these. You always see videos of him doing those. He's practically like right here doing a press in a sense. So you got to lean over even more. And that's where you're really going to hit those lower fibers. That's how you get that full like under boob. That's the real thickness. That's where you get that. But that also comes with stabilizing your rib cage and your core, your abs, not being stuck right here, but being able to be up and open and push your chest up like that. That's going to be how you really get a thick stretch and a full stretch in your chest, which adds thickness a lot.
And then with that, when you are like fully contracted, you know, it wouldn't be beneficial to roll the shoulder forward to get that full, kind of like the cables, like just at the top? Or
yeah, that's, if you think about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dusty, that's the full movement for a press. You're not just pushing with your arms here, you're finishing by protracting your shoulders forward. And that's where the fullest contraction comes. And then you retract and then let your arms come back in that sense. So yeah, that movement with your shoulder blades, that protraction forward and that retraction, that's absolutely necessary. And it's also very key to utilize that to your advantage. Don't do every exercise with it. Maybe, you know, you can do machines. You can start the workout or even focus on a full stretch and just do wider grip. And then keep your elbows and your shoulders pinched together behind you and just hold that slow, controlled eccentric. And that's where you're really going to stretch the muscle more. So holding your body back in that way allows you to kind of break it up in different ways. If that's, that answers the question, right?
Yeah. So like at the beginning, I was talking about things to strengthen, and your serratus anterior is the thing I said, and that's what's responsible for like that last part. So like when you're here, you know, it's chest, and as you end, that's your serratus anterior. And that's the muscle you definitely want to strengthen because it is important for your push movements.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an easy one to get tight and overused. So definitely taking care of that. What actually, here's a good one, Dusty, for you. What are some good post-workout stretches, post-workout kind of mobility even to get you opened up and loose?
So yeah, you definitely want that, you know, chest up and back. We don't want the rounded shoulders. So some stretches to do to help with that. Kind of end it so your chest isn't too tight. You can just go in a doorway and do a pec stretch. So the door is right here. You know, you're just stretching the pecs so we don't get those rounded shoulders, bringing it up and back.
Yeah.
We can do some thoracic mobility stuff. So like getting a foam roller and just laying on it. This is going to force our arms to fall backwards. So we're in that position to bring our arms back. There we can do like some snow angel stretches, some bear hugs, just some shoulder flex, bring the arms up. But that's going to force our shoulders back, which is what we want. So we want to stretch that. So just getting a foam roller underneath us, it's going to drop those shoulders back by itself. So that's a good one.
Just going down your spine.
Yep, just going down the spine.
If you do that in the gym, just be careful where you're waving your arms. You might hit somebody, you know, just smack. I'm sure that looked very interesting in person. But yeah, that's a great way. Utilizing that foam roller, definitely key. Well, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it. And everyone else watching today, thank you so much for joining and sticking with us where we broke down those fundamentals. I really hope this information can help you guys maximize your strength and your muscle growth. So with that being said, guys, that wraps up this whole video. So thank you again, and we'll see you guys next week.